Welcome back to Turning Hard Times to Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to have with me once again Jim Rogers. It's been quite a while since we've had Jim on the show. He really doesn't need an introduction. He's world-renowned. You all have seen him on television, have heard him, probably seen him on the Internet, and have read many of his books. He's a world-renowned traveler and provides an education, a streetwise education that's kind of rare for somebody with his background, having gone to prestigious universities like Yale and Oxford and places like that. Also taught at Columbia. So it's really great to have Jim on with us. I want to get what his latest thoughts are about the world and what's taking place these days, because it has been quite a while since we last spoke to him. Thanks for joining me today, Jim.
I am delighted to be here, Jay. It's been a while. You're right.
Yeah, it's been a while, and so I'm sure there's some catching up to do with you. We don't see you on television over here in America very often anymore. So that was one way that I always kept up with you in the past. But in any event, Jim, what I'd like to talk about today, the title of today's show is, With the West in Decline, Where Can We Run To? Or something along those lines is what we want to ask you. I believe, first of all, I want to ask you if you accept my premise that the West is in decline. And if so, maybe you have some ideas why that's true, and can there be a change? Can we move back in a positive direction again?
Well, Jay, throughout history, nobody has been on top forever. People make it to the top and then they go into decline for whatever reason, and it's always happened that way, whether we like it or not. If you look at most of the Western nations now, they all have gigantic debts. The United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. Where nobody's ever been this deeply in debt. And you look at some of the European countries, I mean, even German cities now have huge debts and have problems. And when I was a kid, Germany was a paragon of virtue and the way things were supposed to be done. So it's always happened. It's happening again, whether we like it or not. And it's always ended badly for the people who get deep in debt and go into decline. So your premise is right, at least if history's any guide.
Yeah, so how did we get off on this debt? Jim, I'm 72 years old. I grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio. The debt was something you weren't supposed to do. How did the West take on this culture of debt? Why did we do that?
Well, during the Second World War, of course, America and others went deeply into debt, but immediately after the debt, most nations set out to repay the debt, and they got the debt down. But then somewhere along the line, people started saying, well, this is not fun. Paying down this debt is not nearly as much fun as spending money. And people said, let's just spend money. And politicians learned to buy votes all over the world, not just in the U.S., but politicians throughout history have learned how to buy votes. So it's easier to spend money and get votes than it is to have austerity and run your affairs the way you're supposed to. Well, yeah, I don't like saying that the United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, but facts are facts.
Well, facts are facts, and so far we've been able to get away with it for a number of reasons. First of all, we have the world's reserve currency. We can print money. It seems as though we can run huge trade deficits, and the rest of the world recycles those dollars back into buying U.S. treasuries. And for the longest time, we were told, well, we can get by with it thanks to the friendliness of our strangers. You live in that part on the other side of the world, over there in Asia. What is the take about American debt? Do you still see an appetite from the countries over in that part of the world, especially China, to keep buying U.S. treasuries?
Well, at the moment, U.S. treasuries yield more than many other countries. Yeah. After 2008, Jay, the American Central Bank said, let's just print a lot of money. And then the other central banks around the world said, okay, we'll do it too. And so they're all printing huge amounts of money, following the American example. And since other countries, in many cases, have a sounder basis than we do, interest interest rates went negative. I mean, there are trillions of dollars now of government debt which has negative interest rates because the other countries are a little sounder than the U.S. So as long as America has higher interest rates than other countries, somebody needs to buy the debt, and they will. Is it good for them or for us? No, it's not good for anybody. Mm-hmm. But those are the facts, and people who are yield hungry are buying U.S. government debt.
Yeah, it seems like, with all the negative rates, I saw a statistic recently that said something like 94% of all investment grade debt in the world was U.S. dollar denominated. And so it would seem as though pension fund managers or people that have to manage money are going to be, as you say, they're going to find treasuries, U.S. treasuries, attractive. But that's got to be then constantly pushing interest rates down here. So it seems so perverse to me, the idea of negative rates. It's just contrary to nature, it seems to me. How is this going to end? I mean, how do you see this playing out if the whole world spirals down into negative rates?
Well, Jay, this has never happened in world history. So when you say it's perverse, it certainly is historically perverse. As I say, it has never, ever happened in the history of the world, and interest rates, even in the U.S., have never been this low. They've never been this low anywhere because all the major central banks have printed staggering amounts of money and keep buying government bonds and driving down interest rates. Every day in the Bank of Japan, the guy comes to work, gets out his printing presses, runs money, prints money, and buys government bonds and stock, or buys ETFs. So, I mean, this is lunacy. Yeah. Absolute lunacy, at least as far as I can tell. Historically, it's lunacy. But they're all doing it, and that's why stock markets are strong in many parts of the world. That's why interest rates are so low. Mm-hmm. Jay, if you give me $1 trillion, I'll show you a very good time.
Yeah.
Well, now it's more than $1 trillion. I mean, the U.S. alone is having over $1 trillion a year of deficit. Mr. Trump says he's doing wonderful things. Well, fine. As I say, give me $1 trillion. I'll show you the best time you've ever had.
Yes, but if that $1 trillion continues to buy less, you need exponential growth of money. It doesn't. I have a hard time getting my head around this whole thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why? Okay, so I will get paid to borrow money now. I mean, it's just I don't know.
Well, Jay, you're exactly right, but that doesn't mean they're not doing it.
Yeah.
You and I can sit here and say this is bad. You and I can sit here and say this is going to end badly. But at the moment, most people are happy. The Japanese are happy. American stock market's going up, et cetera, et cetera. So until we have to pay the price, and we don't have to pay the price yet, everybody's having a good time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to buy that multi-million-dollar house that you used to own over in the west side of Manhattan. I don't have the money, but hey, maybe they'll pay me to borrow money to buy it. I don't know.
Okay, if you could print it, you could buy it. That's your problem. See, you can't print money.
Are you working on that project? Finding a way?
But to print money? No, I'm just still trying to pay my bills. I live with a mentality that I know I'm supposed to pay my bills and not run up a lot of debt, etc.
Well, then maybe
I do want to alert you. This may get better. It may get worse. I mean, now there's a theory called modern monetary theory, I think it's called, which is absurd. At least if history is any guide, it's absurd. But there have been a lot of absurd economic theories that have become accepted, at least for a while. Mr. Marx had a great theory. And for a while, many people thought Karl Marx knew what he was talking about. Well, nobody wants to follow Marxism anymore, but now we have a new theory that is so wonderful. I mean, we don't have to pay our debts. We can have anything we want. I mean, it may well become accepted, and then, someday you and I'll be sitting here saying, oh my God, it's getting worse. But it will. Just as you and I would have sat here and said Marxism is a disaster, and it didn't mean it wasn't around for a while.
I'm not so sure that we don't have some sort of form of Marxism now, because certainly the people that are saving their money are getting hurt, and the people that are spending their money recklessly seem to be coming out ahead. So maybe there is some sort of a redistribution of wealth going on, but it seems to me it isn't going to the people that are the neediest. It seems to be going to the people that are the wealthiest, the people that have money in the stock market, the bond market, and so forth, right? So, as
I said, many people are happy about what's happening.
Yeah.
Japanese stock market is at multi-year highs.
Yeah.
But many markets are at multi-year highs, so somebody's happy.
Yeah, it seems hard. It seems I had David Rosenberg on my show the other day, a couple of weeks ago, actually, and, he's suggesting treasuries. Just, sit with treasuries. He's getting out of the equity market to a great extent because it's in nosebleed territory. But what are your suggestions at this stage? What about commodities, Jim? You're known for commodities. The Rogers Raw Materials Index is still out there. How do you commodities? It would seem to be a place to go when the equity markets and the bond markets are in such a bubble. What are your thoughts?
Well, Jay, I own gold and silver, but I didn't buy gold and silver, I think, say, between 2010, 2019. Mm-hmm. I didn't really add, but now I've started buying. Last summer, I started buying gold and silver again. There may well still be a big spike down, and if so, I hope I'm smart enough to buy a lot more. But throughout history, whether we like it or not, when things get bad and people lose confidence in governments and lose confidence in currencies, they buy gold and silver. Well, I'm like an old peasant. I'm doing it too because I know it'll be okay in the end. That's one area. Agriculture's been a nightmare for decades now. The average age of farmers in America is 58. The average age in Japan is 66. I mean, I can go on and on about how more people in America study public relations than study agriculture.
That's incredible.
So it's actually worse. I'm not going to bother you with more facts, but agriculture has been a nightmare, and something's going to change. Sugar, for instance, is down something like 75 or 80% from its all-time high. Mm-hmm. Not much in your life or anybody's life that's down 80% from its all-time high. So some agricultural product, farming. Hey, become a farmer.
Right.
Right. You're not too old to drive a tractor.
No, but a lot of other stuff that we used to do on farms, I'm a little too old to do these days, I'm afraid. But in any event, Jim, I have to ask you. You left you left New York City. I don't remember how long it was. At least 10 years ago, more than that, right? When did you leave New York City?
Oh, we left finally in 2007. We came to Singapore because I wanted my children to speak Mandarin, and I wanted them to know Asia. In their lifetime, Asia is going to be the most important part of the world, and Mandarin is going to be an extremely important language. So I came here to prepare them for the 21st century.
Yeah. And how old are your daughters now?
One is 16 and one is 11.
Wow.
Jay, I'll quickly brag for a minute. It has worked. It's to my astonishment, the major Chinese network has done 4 specials about my daughters. Oh. I went through Shanghai immigration the other day, and the guy said, "Oh, you're Jim Rogers. Your daughters are great." My daughters are making me famous because their Mandarin is so good.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that really worked out well then. What are your thoughts?
Jay, so far, quickly, let me just say, a lot of people speak English and speak Mandarin who drive tractors and drive taxis. So let's see. You can ask me in 25 years if this works.
Uh-huh. Well, that's very interesting. I'm sure that your daughters are doing well because of yourself and your wife. I'm sure we're really very dedicated parents, and so I'm sure a lot of the credit has to go to the two of you. So you went to Singapore. What are your thoughts now about Singapore relative to the U.S.? I mean, if I had the wherewithal and I was worried about the direction of things here, would I still be better off going to Singapore if they would let me in?
Well, everybody has to make their, moving from New Jersey to Connecticut is a major decision for most people, much less moving from Nebraska to California. So everybody has to decide. We moved to Singapore. It has been great for us. My children are thriving. The schools, the education system is unbelievably demanding and advanced, but my children are coping and doing well. Healthcare here is much better than in most parts of the world. Everything works in Singapore. So for us, it's been great. Will Singapore be great in 20 or 50 years? I have no idea. But at the moment, we're pleased with Singapore. But there are many places you can move. It partly will depend on your own knowledge and desires, your own language ability, and things like that.
Well, in Singapore, I guess you can get by pretty well with English. I've been there a few times, and most people speak some English. But let's ask you. I'd like to ask you about China. Of course, you've been bullish on China long term. I take it you still are.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, China will have problems. Don't think they won't. They're having problems right now.
Wow.
But, Jay, I remind you, America became the most successful country in the 20th century. Along the way, we had 10 or 15 depressions with a D. Yeah. We had a horrible civil war. We had very few human rights. We had massacres in the streets. But we had plenty of problems. But we became successful. China's going to have plenty of problems. Don't worry. But I don't see any other country on the horizon that can take over in the 20th and 21st century.
Right. They certainly, by being net exporters, all these years have built up their foreign reserves. And they are, from what I understand, I don't know how much you can believe, because there's propaganda over here, as you know. Everywhere there's propaganda. But to what extent the Chinese are now building up their military and their capability of defending their their territory, that part of the world. And do you see rising issues in the future between the U.S. and China? Or do you think the U.S. may find itself in such a bankrupt situation that it's going to have to wind back its military? Is that something that you could see happening?
Well, Jay, turn on the television, turn on the internet, read a newspaper. You see what's happening. The U.S. is getting deeper and deeper into debt. I don't like saying this. I'm an American citizen like you, but these are facts, and this has always led to problems. Now, it's also a fact that often in history, when you have a major power which is stagnant or declining and a rising power, they often clash. Not always in history, but they often have. So that's just the way human beings are. I hope it doesn't happen that way. China and America could be wildly prosperous and do things together. The mood in Washington right now is the opposite that, unfortunately, for the world. And trade wars have never been good for anybody. So will America and China clash someday? History says we probably will.
Yeah.
There's no need. We could get rich together.
Yeah, that would be better. But there's a lot of people...
I'd much rather get rich together than fight.
Well, there's a lot of people, though, that are getting rich fighting, too. President Eisenhower warned us about this potential when he was leaving office as the President of the United States. He warned us about the military-industrial complex, and it certainly seems to me that there is a huge amount of money being made by some people in that sector, and certainly the government can bid away scarce resources to buy the best technical people that build the greatest new weapons and using the latest technology and so forth. So it's I don't know. I wish there was a way. I wish there was a way out of this, but I don't see it either, I'm afraid. Other than the fact that the U.S. might run itself into debt. You know, a 1% increase when you have $22 trillion of debt, it's a lot of interest that you have to pay. And it seems to me we saw the Powell pivot at the beginning of last year, or the end of 2017, the beginning of 2018, 2019, the Powell pivot. And you know what did we get up to? Maybe 3.5%, 4% or something like that on the long bond. And so the math doesn't work, it seems to me, Jim. If you grow your debt exponentially and your income is growing in a linear fashion, somewhere along the line, I don't think you need to be Albert Einstein to realize things aren't going to work. So I just wonder if we might not just be emasculating ourselves through this debt process. But in any event,
it's not math. It's a simple arithmetic.
Yeah,
the numbers don't work. Illinois is bankrupt. Connecticut, many places have deep problems, and when interest rates rise again, it's going to affect a lot of people, including people in Europe, not just America. Many people.
I just learned that you've written another book, and you were telling me before we went on the air here that you've written several books recently, and in foreign languages. They're being translated, at least in foreign languages. And the latest one is The Future of Japan and the World That Will Be. I don't know. I forget the exact title. The Future of Japan and something or other. What can you tell us about that book?
One of them in English is called A Warning to Japan. And basically what it talks about, Jay, is that Japanese population has been declining for 10 years. They have a very, very, very low birth rate. They don't allow immigration. So the debt has been going up while population is going down. Japan is one of the largest debtor nations in the world right now, at least internally. And the book is just saying, guys, this is not the opinion of a foreigner. This is arithmetic. Debt is going, you can add the debt and you can subtract the population, and in 50 years there won't be any Japanese anymore. This is a serious problem. And to my astonishment, I did two that became #1 bestsellers last year. I've also written in the books that, Korea is on the rise, and since the Japanese don't like the Koreans and vice versa, it sells a lot of books.
Korea is on the rise. Yes.
Well,
go ahead.
Briefly, let me tell you, the 38th parallel is going to open up before too much longer. And when that happens, the 80 million people on the Korean peninsula, lots of cheap, disciplined, educated labor in the north with lots of natural resources, and in the south, great manufacturing capability and capital raising ability. You put those two countries together on the Chinese border, and it will be a powerhouse.
Wow.
At least for 10 or 20 years.
When do you think we might start seeing this? I mean,
well, it's already starting to happen. You've seen Trump and the Koreans have at least conferences so far. North Korea wants it, South Korea wants it, Russia wants it, China wants it. Japan is against it because they cannot compete with an open Korea, and they know it. America may be some people will tell you America's the problem, but it's going to happen one way or the other because there's so many people who want it to happen, and it should happen. I mean, the Koreans spend staggering amounts of money on defense every year, both North and South.
Yeah.
It's a waste of money and time, and they could make a lot of money together instead of killing each other.
Well, this is a bright spot then, a possibility, I guess. And I guess have you gone to Korea lately? Is it a country you visited? Because
I was in Korea yesterday. I'm going again tonight. I've actually been to North Korea twice when it was legal. It's not legal now for Americans. No, I've been to Korea a lot. And as I say, I'm going again tonight.
Interesting. Well, I guess we would like to keep track of what you're thinking along those lines, Jim. And I suppose you do some interviews here and there on the internet that we can keep track. You have a website that is that a way that we can keep up with what you're doing?
Well, the website really just has my schedule. I tell you, I'm not as energetic as you, ambitious as you. You do your broadcasting. I'm just a simple person. I'm too lazy.
Yes, I know. You're such
too lazy.
You're such a simple person. You said you're a peasant, right? You're buying gold like a peasant.
I have a peasant mentality when it comes to gold and silver.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's very interesting. Well, I know there's some other people that would claim to be peasants too that in your league, I think, that are buying gold these days. I think they see some handwriting on the wall.
I don't like it. Let me say again, Jay, I don't like it.
I know.
But facts are facts. I have to deal with facts.
Yeah, I know. I remember years ago you telling me that you would rather own lead than gold. And
that was a time. Yes.
That was at that time. Yes, indeed. And wouldn't we all? I mean, I've always said if I could make money some other way, and I'm sure I could, but I mean, I've gotten into this business as a gold bug, not because I want to see the world go to hell, but because I see what's happening. And I believe there would come a time when it would be wise to own gold. Well, even in days when you were bearish on gold, you believed it made sense to own a little bit of it. So, in a diversified portfolio. Well, Jim, just sort of rounding out here, get your ideas then in terms of where people should be putting their money this year. You said you're buying some gold. I think you're seeing probably rising problems in the financial markets, so that would be one place. Can we keep buying stocks? I guess you should own some stocks because they just keep going up until they don't.
Well, the Japanese market's down 40% from its all-time high. The Chinese market is down 60%. There are places that a Russian market is hated. These are places that I own. I will be buying. Japan I'm buying, but I own China. I'll be buying more because of the collapse from the flu, the virus. Russia, I am buying more as we speak. There are still markets that are depressed where good things are happening. I told you about agriculture. Agriculture is very depressed. I know, Jay, that you grew up learning to buy low and sell high. There's still some things that are low.
Yes, I in theory I have learned that. In practice, not always. But anyway, Jim, it's really so good to hear from you, and I would like to keep up with you once in a while and get your thoughts because I think they're very valuable. You're a man of, you've had a lot of experience now. You've traveled around the world. You're a very well-educated person, even though you claim to be a peasant. But it's really good to talk with you again. I want to thank you so much and wish you all the best, you and your family. And it's great to hear about your daughters. I can tell you're a very proud father. So,
of course I am. But Jay, let's do it again sometime.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jim.